what are your thoughts on George Lucas' comments on Marvel is cinema? Anything on the big screen is cinema. So this interview came out with George Lucas where he was directly asked about the comments from like Martin Scorsese saying that Marvel movies aren't cinema. And essentially George Lucas said cinema is the art of moving pictures. So if you have moving pictures, by definition, that is cinema.
Martin Scorsese said he didn't think of Marvel movies as cinema. Do you agree with him?
Look, cinema is the art of the moving image. So if the image moves, then it's cinema.
And then kind of went on to talk about all of technology and kind of went in a totally different direction with it after that. But essentially, George Lucas defended blockbusters, comic book movies, all of it as cinema because they are by definition moving pictures. And I think they're just, you have to look at George Lucas and Martin Scorsese in two very different realms. They emerged at the exact same time. They exploded into the, Mount Rushmore of directors at the same time. I mean, they had early projects in the late 60s, and then they had indie ones that get like smaller ones that kind of started to get them buzz in the early 70s. And at the end of the 70s, they put out some work that made them iconic for the rest of their lives. And they're now both in their 80s. But George Lucas made Star Wars, this incredibly mainstream popcorn franchise that sold billions and billions of toys to children. That's what George Lucas did. And it changed my life, it changed your life, but it was very mainstream and very commercial. And I don't say any of that is a negative. That's not a criticism. That's the true thing. Martin Scorsese has spent his career making R-rated, serious dramas that are thematically rich, that dwell in very dark subject matter. And what I think he's done, one family movie, Hugo, and even that one, it's dealing with cinema from 100 years ago being lost. So even his family children's movie is dramatically heavier, weightier, and more historic than your average film made for families. So you have two guys about the same age, took off around the same time, but their careers went in such different directions and they represent such different things. So you have one guy that looks at his legacy with Star Wars, and it is very commercial, and he believes that he made art, that he made cinema, that he did something that transformed the genre. And he did. Like, if just historically speaking, on multiple different levels, George Lucas was radically influential on film. So much that just being on the technical side of things with ILM, THX, all of this stuff that he did for visual effects. I mean, Pixar started as a branch of Lucasfilm in the early 80s. And then Steve Jobs purchased it, but it was a tech company in a lot of ways, and then it morphed into what it became into. But it started with George Lucas. George Lucas stole it to Steve Jobs. So George Lucas, looks at what he did, and the idea that the modern popcorn commercial films aren't cinema reflects backwards to say that the popcorn mainstream commercial films of 40 years ago weren't cinema, which George Lucas would reject that. Like, no, I made cinema. But if you're talking about film as just art and serious, you kind of the lack of a better word, it's the more pretentious side of things, you can see where there are two different perspectives and why George Lucas would be protective of commercial broad appeal films. And then you could also look at someone like Scorsese and say there's something different between making a movie that's a roller coaster ride, that's all entertainment, versus making a movie like Silence. And they're both moving pictures, but are they the same thing? One is a great film, one is a fun movie. You can see where he'd want that distinction and could view what he's doing as this is art, versus those are corporate products. It's literally a gigantic corporation. Disney has there's the board run by who's being told by the shareholders that they need to make more money, therefore need to put out more content. And so film as content that's designed to sell tickets, sell toys, sell passes to Disney World, like all of that stuff, to sell subscriptions to a streaming service. It's so commercial that it's different from what Scorsese's doing. And you can see why he would want to draw a distinction between the two. That's the way that I perceive of it. I think that George Lucas is giving a technically correct answer, that it's cinema, it's moving pictures, whether it's for more purely artistic purposes or for more purely financial purposes. They're both movies, they're both moving pictures. But I also fully understand that having vocabulary that can distinguish between these two things is useful. And acknowledging that in the one broad category they're the same, but in another category they're very different, is important and useful for discussion. Having specific vocabulary is important. Most of these clips are pulled from my Patreon live streams. I do about 6 live streams every single month. For $2 per month, $20 per year, you can get access to all the exclusive videos and live streams. For $5 per month, you get your name on my end card. At the top tier, you get a 30-minute video chat with me each month. The link down below in the description has more information.